So Battlefield 6 Season 2 has been out for a couple of days, and I've been playing it, kind of testing out the new map, the new sort of movement changes that were introduced in this season, just kind of seeing how it is in comparison to the way the game was in the state of Season 1, that sort of a thing. So there's quite a bit of interesting things that have happened between the end of Season 1 and basically the start of Season 2, and there have been some interesting statements made by the actual devs for Battlefield 6 that have been more or less confusing in a way, and very strange to kind of hear what's been happening sort of behind the scenes, because it looks like a lot of the things that have been sort of the major complaints from the Battlefield 6 community, it doesn't look like a lot of those things are actually going to be getting any fixes really anytime soon, and of course that's definitely hindering the actual quality and the potential of this game in my opinion, and that's exactly what I'm going to be discussing in today's video. But before we do that, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications set to all so you can stay up to date with all of the content here in the channel, and let's just dive right on into it. So Season 2 introduced a brand new map, Contaminated. We got along with it some new weapons, a new mode, which is the VL7 Strike, and for the most part, I don't really have many negative things to say about the actual map. I do think that it's a decent map. I think it's a fun one. Definitely one of my top favorite maps right now in Battlefield 6. I feel like I do prefer Eastwood by just a slight margin, but I do think Contaminated is a good sort of use of what Battlefield 6 can actually do with its map design. Now, of course, I do have this criticism of it just not being large enough to handle jets, and I do find that it's a bit of a waste that in Battlefield 6 we just have so many maps that don't include actual jets. I feel like that's something that is pretty fun in the Battlefield titles, to actually have access to all of this aircraft, and I just think there's not enough maps currently to allow you to experience that full potential. The Little Bird is apparently pretty overpowered according to what I've been seeing online. I have seen it in game, I haven't tried it out personally, but it does look like it's a pretty cool sort of addition to the air vehicle lineup. Contaminated itself does have those underground zones. It has tunnels through the mountains. It does look a lot like Monte Grappa from Battlefield 1, but I do think that it has a bit more complexity than some of the other maps here in Battlefield 6, just because it's got those different sections and it's quite spread out. So it is a medium-sized map. It doesn't feel very small, but it's just not very large, which is something that I think, you know, it's a little bit difficult to kind of keep getting these sorts of maps when, you know, the community has been asking for those larger maps since basically the game launched, since the open beta, if we're being fair here. So Hagenthal Base, which is in the second phase of Season 1, I think it's going to be basically sort of an extension of the Contaminated map, but just further underground, and it's going to be, it looks like something more similar to a Metro or Lockers style map. So obviously that's not a bad thing to have something that feels like, you know, those iconic maps from older Battlefield games, but at this stage, because we just have been getting so many small and medium-sized maps, it definitely feels like the timing is a little bit irritating, but you know, if it's a good map, it's a good map. The thing is though, there isn't really much to say about Season 2 in comparison to Season 1. Sort of the biggest changes that they did are obviously the new content, and then there have been some changes to movement and gunplay. So this is kind of split between, I've seen opinions from the more competitive side of Battlefield and then the more just casual side of Battlefield. There seems to be a sort of split of opinion on whether or not these movement and gunplay changes were actually good for the game. Personally, I did prefer the movement before, just because I felt like it was a little bit more fluid, but I can also understand why people might prefer the new movement after I played a couple of matches with the Season 2 update. It just does kind of make it a little bit easier to not get outplayed by people who are more movement based, which I do think is something that Battlefield hasn't really got the optimization for, being a movement based shooter. I think that that's something that should stick to other games, and I do like movement based shooters. I really enjoyed Titanfall 2 back when it came out and things like that, but I just don't really find that that sort of movement fits with Battlefield as a game. In terms of gunplay, I don't know if I really noticed that many changes. Now, definitely there does feel like there is, for instance, bullet drop-off rates. You know, before you could be able to hit somebody with an SMG from quite a good distance, and I felt like that wasn't as intense this time, but I didn't really feel like there was a huge difference. Now, some people haven't been fans of that, but again, these changes didn't really affect my opinion of Season 2, because because more or less it's about the exact same as Season 1 has been, so I didn't really notice that much of a change in the actual core gameplay. Now, I felt like optimization was a little better, the netcode felt better, hit registration did feel better, so I do think there were some improvements in that sort of regard. I haven't gotten a chance to try the new weapons yet because they are locked through the battle pass and I just haven't progressed through that much yet, but you know, I do think that they're probably not going to feel that different to what's currently in the game. The new VL7 strike mode is okay. It's not my favorite. I'm not sure if I'm really a fan of it, and I kind of feel like it's pretty gimmicky. It just doesn't feel like it's that different compared to just playing without it. You kind of have to put a gas mask on, otherwise it affects your visibility every now and then, and only on certain objectives. It's not like it's covering like the whole map or a decent portion of the map. It's just on some objectives. So I don't really know if it's that great of a mode. It's just kind of a mode, you know what I mean? So that's kind of my opinion on the VL7 strike stuff. But Contaminated on Breakthrough has been a really fun experience. Contaminated in general is a pretty solid map for Battlefield so far. I have to try to see what it's like on the more small scale modes. But with that aside, basically those are my thoughts on the Season 2 content. It's not a lot of content, and it's definitely not what I was hoping to see, especially after a whole month of a delay. But it looks like this is kind of what we're gonna have to expect from the future seasons of Battlefield 6. There have been some statements from Battlefield Studios in some articles on different websites and things like that I found, and one of the things that kind of struck me as a little bit odd was this statement from a developer in Battlefield 6, which is that apparently they want to create larger maps, they want to create more maps, and that's something that they wanted to do, but somehow they're apparently lacking the resources to push more content into each season, which definitely was odd to me because I do believe there's 4 or 5 studios working on this under the umbrella of Battlefield Studios, and the game I believe made over $1 billion in revenue or something crazy like that. It sold millions. It was the best-selling game of 2025. So you'd think that they'd be able to push more content to actually keep up that momentum for this live service, especially because EA had echoed that they wanted this to be sort of like a Call of Duty for them, right? They wanted it to be a game that could get 100 million players, an annual release. And it's just sort of confusing me, and it feels a little bit odd that that's their goal, but the actual game itself just isn't releasing as much content as it possibly could. And the game didn't really recover that much compared to what it lost, right? It didn't even peak at 100,000 exactly on Steam. Of course, there are other platforms, and yeah, personally I play on PlayStation 5, but there's clearly just not a huge recovery from what was lost in Season 1 because I think people realize there's just not a lot of content for a game that's padding out these seasons and drip feeding basically like 2 or 3 weapons. It just feels a little bit odd how they're structuring the live service compared to what their actual end goals are, and the fact that they're saying there's a lack of resources is definitely bizarre, to say the least. I've seen some people speculate that they're just moving on to the next Battlefield game and that there's not really a lot of people left to work on Battlefield 6, which even if that is the actual case that's happening, still you would have to support your current game so that you can get people to want to come back for the next game, right? One of the reasons why, for instance, people would have bought Call of Duty was because there was so much content in each season, and if the game was decent, they would feel compelled to buy the next game. Even if for some people the game wasn't that great, it's just a game that they wanted to buy because Call of Duty had established itself as the flagship of the FPS genre, and Battlefield hasn't really done anything to assert itself as that sort of flagship for people. On top of that, apparently the next couple of seasons aren't really going to look that different in comparison to what we've seen in Season 2. So apparently Season 2 is sort of being considered the foundation within Battlefield Studios for the next couple of seasons. One of the heads at the studio says that they believe this is the strongest season that they've made so far, that there is no such a thing as a perfect Battlefield season, but that they said Season 2 is much bigger than Season 1 because they've got more maps and content and things like that. But from a personal standpoint, after having seen the roadmaps for Season 1 and Season 2, kind of comparing what the actual amount of content is, yes, it feels like there might be a little bit more stuff in Season 2, but it's not really that substantial because a lot of the modes are limited time, and they said that they're going to keep doing limited time modes because they want to appease basically a lot of people effectively, and that they're willing to keep some of the limited time modes if there's a positive response from the player base for those modes. They didn't say that they will, guaranteed, but that they're considering it. which I have said before, but I don't believe limited time modes and just cosmetic stuff like battle passes are really the core of the content of a Battlefield game. I feel like maps, I feel like weapons, these are the most important things. Vehicles, these contribute a lot to the game's actual flow. I feel like these three things need to be the priority, and having only 2 maps a season really just isn't cutting it so far, and it doesn't look like they're really going to increase that to 3, because again, from some interviews I've been seeing, it looks like 2 is kind of just sort of the standard they're going for in these upcoming seasons, and they didn't really comment on if they're going to add more. They said that they've heard the feedback from the community, that they know that the game needs larger maps, that it needs more maps, but they didn't exactly state what specific things they're going to be doing in order to fix the situation that's happening. I just feel like it's quite disheartening to see just how much Battlefield has taken this sort of direction in not really supporting the game properly, despite the fact that it had, in my opinion, so much potential to be a really solid game. They actually beat Call of Duty, you know what I mean? So this was honestly a really solid start, and it has just been in a decline since. It's definitely strange, and I'm not sure how this is going to bode for the future of this game. I don't really know what it's going to take to actually get it back to any solid numbers, because after hearing what I've been hearing, I don't really think Season 3 is going to actually do that much in terms of making genuine changes. I feel like this game needs a huge amount of change in order to recover all that negative player sentiment and turn it into a positive sort of sentiment. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications set to all so you can stay up to date with all of the content here on the channel. And that's all for today, folks.